Before we begin, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact time at which you're listening to this narration. We're interested to know in which places and at what times of day or night these documented accounts reach. You're a window washer, not a spy. The security chief sneered, his voice dripping with condescending amusement as he waved a dismissive hand. You're fired for causing a panic. Leo's only crime had been to report a suspicious, covert hand signal he'd seen through the glass of a skyscraper. But what that arrogant security chief, a man blinded by his own petty authority, didn't know was that the office belonged to a top defense contractor. He didn't know that the company's CEO, a retired Marine general, was Leo's former commanding officer, and he was about to get the warning of his life from a man he had just thrown out like trash. Leo Valdez existed in a world suspended between the sky and the street, a silent observer of the powerful and the privileged. At 42, he was a man who saw the world from a unique and often lonely perspective, from the outside looking in, dangling hundreds of feet in the air from his window washing platform. To the powerful executives in the gleaming, sterile office towers of downtown, he was completely invisible, a part of the city's vast, impersonal machinery, as insignificant as a pigeon on a ledge. His life was a quiet, solitary rhythm of ropes, carabiners, squeegees, and the vast, silent, and unforgiving expanse of the sky. But this quiet, isolated life was a deliberate choice, a sanctuary he had painstakingly built to escape the deafening noise of his past before he washed windows. He had been Sergeant Leo Valdez, a scout sniper with the 1st Marine Division, a man whose job had been to see things others missed. He was trained to notice the subtle glint of a scope in the sun from a mile away, the unnatural movement of a bird that signaled a hidden enemy, the minuta, almost imperceptible details that could mean the difference between life and death for his entire platoon. He had left the service with a chest full of medals, a handshake from his commanding officer, and a mind full of ghosts he couldn't outrun. He had sought out a job where he could be alone with his thoughts, a job where the only person he had to rely on was himself, and a job where no one would ever know the terrible things his eyes had seen. One crisp, clear Tuesday morning, his two worlds, the past and the present, the soldier and the civilian, were about to collide with terrifying force. He was on the 42nd floor of the Omnicorp Tower, a gleaming monument to corporate power that housed some of the city's most influential companies. As he expertly guided his platform to a stop, he found himself looking directly into the main boardroom of Sterling Dynamics, one of the nation's leading and most secretive defense contractors. Inside, a high-stakes meeting was in progress. Men in expensive, perfectly tailored suits were gathered around a massive, polished mahogany table, listening intently to a presentation from a group of foreign businessmen. It was just another day in the world of corporate power, another fleeting scene he would normally ignore, focusing instead on the rhythm of his work. Dip, wipe, squeegee, repeat. But then he saw it. One of the foreign businessmen, a man with cold, calculating eyes and an expensive watch, suddenly touched his left eyebrow with 2 fingers, then casually tapped the face of his watch. It was a gesture that lasted less than a second, a tiny, insignificant movement that was completely invisible to the untrained eye. But to Leo, it was like a lightning bolt striking the side of the building. It was a covert hand signal, a specific one. It was a signal he had been trained to recognize during intense counterterrorism briefings years ago. It was a signal used by a known and dangerous extremist cell to confirm that a primary target was in the room and that the operation was a go. His blood ran cold. He knew he couldn't ignore it. This wasn't just a business meeting. It was the final confirmation stage of a hostile act. As soon as his platform reached the safety of the roof, he raced down the service elevator, his heart pounding against his ribs. He burst into the sterile, quiet security office in the lobby. The chief of security was a man named Peterson, a smug, overly confident man who strutted around in a uniform that was one size too small and covered in an absurd amount of meaningless gold braid. Leo, out of breath and his mind racing, tried to explain what he had seen. "Sir, 42nd floor, Sterling Dynamics boardroom." One of the men in the meeting, he made a hand signal. A threat signal. "I know what I saw. You need to lock down this building." Peterson looked him up and down, a lazy, condescending smirk playing on his lips. "A hand signal? Son, you've been spending way too much time up there in the sun. Your mind's playing tricks on you." Leo was insistent, his voice now low and urgent. "Sir, I'm a Marine veteran, scout sniper. I was trained for this. This is a credible threat. I am telling you, that was the wrong thing to say." Peterson's amusement curdled into professional jealousy and outright rage. He saw Leo not as a concerned citizen, but as a direct challenge to his authority, an insult to his position. And that's when he sneered the words that would change everything. "You're a window washer, not a spy. Your job is to clean the glass, not invent wild conspiracy theories. You know what? You're fired for causing a panic and harassing our tenants." He then turned to his two bored-looking guards. "Escort this man out of the building, and make sure he never works on this property again." Leo was stunned, thrown out onto the street for doing the right thing, for doing his duty. He was a trained observer, a man whose skills had saved lives, but in this world of polished floors and petty tyrants, he was just a window washer. As he walked away, a profound and bitter sense of failure washed over him. He had seen a threat, and he had been powerless to stop it. He hadn't seen the biggest surprise yet. What Leo didn't know was that while Peterson had so arrogantly dismissed him, one of the younger security guards, a former Army private who had been standing by the door, had overheard the entire conversation. He didn't know anything about covert hand signals, but he knew the look of a genuinely concerned veteran when he saw one. Quietly, breaking protocol, he sent a single anonymous text message up the official security channel for Sterling Dynamics, a message that simply read, "Possible insider security threat in main boardroom." Ex-Marine window washer reported seeing a threat signal. Was fired by building security for reporting it. Proceed with caution. That short, simple text message, a small act of solidarity from one veteran to another, worked its way up to the CEO's personal security detail in less than a minute. The CEO of Sterling Dynamics was a man named General James Ironclad Miller, retired. He was a legendary no-nonsense Marine who had built his multi-billion-dollar company on the same principles of integrity and vigilance he had lived by in the Corps. And, as fate would have it, he had been Sergeant Leo Valdez's commanding officer years ago. He knew better than anyone on this planet that when Sergeant Valdez said he saw something, you listened. The general was out of the office at a conference, but his elite security team, comprised entirely of ex-Special Forces operators, was not, and it was at this exact moment that everything changed. Minutes later, as Peterson was smugly sipping his coffee and congratulating himself on handling the crazy window washer, the doors to his office burst open. A team of stone-faced men in dark suits, the general's executive protection detail, swarmed the room with deadly efficiency. "We're locking this building down, and you are relieved of command," their leader said, his voice leaving no room for argument. At the same time, up on the 42nd floor, the general's men, armed with the intel from the text message, professionally and silently interrupted the meeting. The foreign businessman who had made the signal was discreetly and professionally apprehended before he could even react. A search of his briefcase revealed not business proposals, but sophisticated surveillance equipment and detailed plans for a major act of corporate espionage that would have crippled the nation's defense infrastructure. When General Miller returned later that day, he reviewed the security footage from the lobby himself. He watched the entire exchange, Leo's desperate, urgent warning, Peterson's arrogant, condescending dismissal, and the moment his former sniper was fired for his loyalty and vigilance. The general's face was like granite. He summoned both Peterson and Leo to his boardroom on the 42nd floor. Peterson walked in, still arrogant, somehow believing he was about to be praised for the successful operation. Leo walked in, believing he was in more trouble. The general stood up, his 6'4" frame an intimidating presence that filled the room. He looked at Peterson. "Mr. Peterson," he began, his voice dangerously quiet, This morning, one of my former Marines, a man whose observational skills I have personally trusted with the lives of hundreds of men, gave you a credible, actionable intelligence report. He did his duty, and you mocked him. You belittled his service, and you fired him. He then turned to Leo, his expression softening. Sergeant Valdez, your vigilance and your refusal to be silenced today saved this company from a catastrophic security breach. You upheld the highest traditions of the Marine Corps. He then turned his icy gaze back to Peterson. You, on the other hand, have proven that you are utterly incompetent to be in charge of the security of a hot dog stand, let alone this building. You're fired. Peterson was utterly destroyed, his career ruined by his own arrogance. But the general wasn't finished. He looked at Leo. Sergeant, I have a new job for you. I'm promoting you. How would you like to be the new chief of security for this entire building, effective immediately? Leo was speechless. He had come to the tower that morning to wash its windows, and now he was being asked to guard its secrets. He had been fired for being a spy, only to be hired as a guardian. From his new office on the 42nd floor, he had a new view, a view from the inside looking out, his quiet, unwavering vigilance finally given the honor it deserved. Kindness and merit are recorded, even when they go unnoticed. To continue hearing stories that prove it, don't forget to follow the Merit Ledger and leave a comment about a time when a small act of kindness made a huge difference. Because every life is a record worth reading.